if you like, that the person is making a payment to see you, and therefore you can reasonably expect they have something worthwhile to say, otherwise they'd be giving that money to somebody else. But on the other hand, you don't get all the problems that happen if the money goes to you. What happens is the money which often would have been spent on hosting a trade show stand or taking someone on a golf weekend or doing those other rather kind of extravagant things that businesses do to demonstrate their commitment to each other. Instead, the commitment, rather than going to a golf club or rather than going to a kind of, sports event in the form of hospitality, rather than going to an exhibition hall, it actually goes to a really worthwhile charity. I think this is an interesting idea because I think economists will love it because it uses effectively costly signaling and commitment to filter your attention. If only email cost £10 to send, every email you received will be really, really relevant. So it does that wonderful, wonderful thing. But more important than the fact that economists will find it beautiful, I think both the meeting setters and the meeting takers will, as ordinary human beings, find the whole thing both gloriously efficient and unbelievably elegant. I'm really, really proud to support this business. I think it's magnificent.
And there you have it. Gloriously efficient and unbelievably magnificent, eloquent. I couldn't even begin to find those words. Happy Monday, everyone. It's 5 o'clock. We've got a great guest today, Krist Davood, who's the CIO of the Shann Group. Now, if you do want to be a guest on our MagicRoom podcast, we're in search of the most distinguished change makers to join us on the podcast. These are basically individuals who have risen up through the ranks and are now looking, or they're now driven, for example, to give back to others. A bit like Krist and the 1,000 other execs that we've got on the platform. And you'll find a link in the post to our tool. It's called the Magic Mind Card. Now, this is a short test, but it's crafted to unveil your distinctive visionary style. So business leaders and technology leaders, it's a tool to help you pinpoint, or it's a tool to help us pinpoint the most influential leaders to spotlight in the Magic Room. So if you've got 45 seconds, good luck. It's free to do the test and the results become immediately. So what we're all about here is upgrading some of those old behaviors, because like Rory just said, the value is psychologically generated, and that is where the magic exists. And I think there's a lot of scope for innovation in the decision-making engines I think that we're all using today. I don't think the algorithms, for example, are meant to supplant human decision-making, but I think it's to prompt decision-making to make better, more nuanced, more intelligent and varied decisions. So, for example, instead of saying, Krist Davood is not the right person for me to speak with, you might just actually spend a few minutes contemplating what it is about that algorithm that brought you two together and cause you to be matched, because that's pretty much where the opportunity exists. That's what we've discovered. We've discovered that opportunity and lucky accidents happen on the borders, not in the places where you would normally think. And so I'm going to bring in Krist Davood to come and have a chat with us. So, Krist, hey.
Hello, and how are you?
I'm very well. It's Monday, and normally on Mondays, I don't know about energy-wise, but my Sundays are quite. I grew up in a Jamaican family, so it was kind of church day.
All right, yes.
You stay at home, you eat food, and then you fall asleep at 3 o'clock watching the football, and then you. That's normally my Sunday. So by the time Monday comes around, I'm normally pretty slow. But how's your Monday been?
Yeah, the Monday's been good. It's one of those Mondays where there's a lot happening all simultaneously. You wouldn't think so early in the year, but now the days of things being a little bit slower during December, January, going to February, are long ago. They don't exist anymore.
Yeah. What's your thoughts before we get into this? What's your thoughts, just very quickly, high level, on work from home? Are you for or against?
It's really 50-50. I like the hybrid arrangements. It's applicable to particular roles. In my humble opinion, it's not applicable to all roles, particularly when we're talking about collaboration, some of the things we'll be talking about today. So the answer is really 50-50, but it is relevant for particular roles, particularly transactional roles.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't think you can build a car from your lounge room, but you know, but you can probably but you can probably design one, which is very interesting. So, look, thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us who you are, what you do, and how you got here as a CIO.
Okay, so who I am, I'm a person that's been heavily influenced by Star Trek since that I was very, very young, specifically Captain Kirk. And what I liked about him was his leadership capabilities. You know, his consultative. You know, there's a person that you could turn to. He's a person that gets things happening. And from a very young age, I was always interested in technology, and I was fascinated by how things worked. And that's another part of Star Trek that I enjoy. But specifically going back to Kirk, that's something that I always wanted to do. Being the leader from a not only a tactical point of view, but from a strategic perspective. So who and what am I? That technologist that I wouldn't classify myself as a nerd, but I am a person that tries to, have those best qualities from a leadership perspective. That's who I am in a nutshell.
We had a CIO. It was Simon Reuter, the CIO of the CTO of CBus on last week, and he said he was recalling how he started his journey, and he said that he started out, one of his first jobs was in a child prison.
Oh, right. Okay.
But he took a step back and goes, "Oh, it's not a child prison; it's a detention center." But I actually thought I thought the child prison had a much better ring to it. It would have stopped people or stopped kids from committing crime, I think. So
right.
So you mentioned
like Simon. I've always been interested in technology, like as Simon's examples of putting things together, the hardware and things like that. That always fascinated me, but that wasn't the compelling part. It was about that leadership role, that a role that allows you to make things happen rather than just tactically just being in the moment. So from that perspective, that's what motivated me.
Where do you see technology in 5 years? I mean, AI is obviously crazy right now. I mean, let's not even talk about the $3 trillion company in video, because that's just nuts, and their growth is just out of control. But where do you see the vision, and what's your vision and the future trends sort of thing for the next 5 years?
Well, I see the trends going in the direction that says that technology will be embedded as part of our lives, right? Like nowadays, people carry around, iPhones and go around in their cars and, watch Netflix and all those sort of things. And all the real technologists, out there, perhaps watching this, would recognize those as essentially computer systems, as IT systems, but you don't refer to your iPhone as a computer, nor your television, nor your automobile. They're suit a particular function, but they are in fact technology. So going back to the question, where do I see these things? I see it becoming more and more embedded in our lives. And the true risk out in the future was, how far do we allow it to go? How open are people to having, embedded devices into their bodies, to swap out iPhones and just embed technology? How open are people to having data analytics really and using AI? What is it they'll be doing and who has access to that data? So it's certainly exciting times ahead, but also in equal measure, there's also some risks that need to be catered to as well.
Yeah, totally. Well, so tell us about the Shann Group. What do they do?
The Shann Group is part of the supply chain process. So we're effectively the broker between a buyer and a seller. So the seller are suppliers from around the planet, be it China, be it Germany, be it Italy, the US, etc. And the buyers are local, either manufacturing organizations or service providers. So one example of a service provider is like, for example, Krist Davood, for example, is one of our customers. They buy, products out from us, at a relatively cheap price. They put their cost plus model on top of said product, and then they on-sell those services to installing the blinds at people's, houses and businesses and that sort of thing. So we're that broker between a buyer and seller. We operate across Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, and China. And as I mentioned, our suppliers from around the world.
I mean, there's the supply chains right now. I sometimes think kind of rationally about Australia and how detracted it is or distracted it is from everywhere else on the world, in the world. I mean, I know for a fact right now there is a gas shortage. The carbon gas that goes into the fizzy drinks. I know for a fact there is a massive shortage of that in Australia. And for example, when it comes in, the two places that get it first. So the first two places to get the carbon, or is it called CO2? Whatever it is, the first two places. First is hospitals.
Okay.
Have a guess what the second one is.
Well, I was going to say something to do with manufacturing, but
Chickens.
What is it?
Slaughter of chickens.
Okay.
Because the chickens have to be gassed to go to sleep, and so they can be euthanized, humanely. So hospitals and chickens get the. And I think about the gas that's coming into the country, thinking, well, it only takes one ship to get blown up, and then the whole of that gas isn't coming in anymore. And then all the other supply chains are backed up in Singapore, and you see all those ships backing up. They're not going to come down here, which means within a couple of weeks you wouldn't necessarily have much to go on. You'd be out of pretty much anything.
But that reminds me, going back, I think it's like a decade or two ago from memory, but that just shows you how delicate the supply chain process is, hence the term supply chain. I remember when the Esso gas refinery or plant, blew up here in Victoria, and that meant weeks of cold showers for millions of Victorians. I don't know whether you remember that. And I was quite fortunate. I have a little bit of a chuckle now, but I was quite fortunate because half of my time at that time was out in Asia. So, I didn't get as many cold showers, say, as my wife and that sort of thing. But it just shows you how, to go back to your point, how open we are, or how susceptible we are, how, how delicate that supply chain process really is.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, the cold showers are great because I think I watched a podcast yesterday, The Diary of a CEO, and he was saying that if you jump into a cold bath, like the cold plunge, it actually makes you lose weight. Happy days. I mean, I'm always up for losing a few pounds, but the supply chains are obviously, there's a big focal point on them and their role in social impact right now. I think you're starting to see third party, for example, carbon third party risk and all that sort of stuff. Where do you see the supply chain's role in social impact? Because there's a lot that can be done, for example, with climate change. Do you see and the third party emissions? Do you see sort of some technology playing a part in that?
Yes, certainly. Supply chain has a huge role to play there. By its very nature, it operates across the planet, and it's something that's top of mind, particularly from our executives' perspective when we're talking about, the social good and that sort of thing. More specifically about how we bring in things, right? Plane versus boat, versus rail. So it's, like a big consideration of ours is how it gets in, and also, what the social emissions are going to, what the social impact is going to be in terms of emissions. And I'm quite drawn to that, that particular type of ethos, that particular type of thinking. Not only that in terms of my role from a CIO point of view, but also what I do in my so-called spare time. So in my spare time, I'm not an executive director, but in charge of technology for a social platform called Housing All Australians. And a big part of that is about how, as we're assisting people to finding housing and that sort of thing, how technology can play a role in terms of, doing our bit for the social good. I mean, by its very ethos, Housing All Australians does a lot of social good, but specifically around what we can do around things like climate change or impact to environment and, that sort of thing. And, one aspect is that we're a virtual organization. So we don't drive to each other, or we minimize that as much as possible, that I should say, but we're mainly a digital organization. We use data analytics, to optimize consumption and reduce environmental impact and that sort of thing. But particularly when I talk about Shann, or whether I'm talking about Housing All Australians, a big part of what I'm talking about is really three things. One is that collaboration with other social enterprises, like one organization that I can't mention that that we are considering merging with. This is Housing All Australians that I'm talking about. We're making sure that our mission statements align, our values align, particularly around social as well as other things. There's also innovative funding models, more specifically around things like to do with corporate social responsibility and what that means to not only the board of the companies we're dealing with, but also their staff as well, and what they do and how they do it, and whether they talk, they walk the talk, so to speak. And obviously we need to measure the impact as well, which is, part of what I do, both from a Shann perspective as well as from a Housing All Australians point of view, So to establish clear metrics, to assess the social impact of technology initiatives and, understand what the tangible benefits would be of that.
Yeah, there's a lot can be done. I mean, you heard Rory at the beginning of this podcast. He talks about, if only emails cost $10 to send, you can probably bet that they will be worth reading. But the amount of money that can be generated, he spoke one day about the amount of junk emails that we're getting. You probably get, as a CIO, you probably get harassed a lot by vendors trying to get some time in the diary, picking up the phone, they're cold calling. Just imagine if there was a 1 cent levy on every email that got sent. Well,
oh my goodness, yeah.
Well, there's 333 billion emails sent every single day. So that would generate trillions of dollars that could be used to build housing for people that need it. Or you just think about where that could go. You could take that money in, but what it would also do is reduce the amount of junk emails and the spam and the stuff that we're getting in our inboxes. So I think there's a lot that could be done, but it's great that you're on the board of doing stuff. And I was just putting up on the screen there, you've had 3 meetings through us. So you talk about leveraging technology and social impact. You've actually helped 44 seriously ill kids in hospital just by having one of these video calls. So that's kind of exciting.
Wow. Yeah, it is. That's particularly when you put a number to it. I don't know what to say to that. That's quite humbling.
Well, it's kind of interesting. All it takes is, and I mentioned this in the beginning of the podcast. We're trying to reframe a little bit about the way things, the upgrading old behaviors, because I think value is psychologically generated. That's where the magic exists, right? So what we value is the meaning of things, not actually the thing. We value what it means to us. And I think the fact that you've had 3 meetings, and those meetings have been 45 minutes over video, or whatever they're, of coffee meeting or whatever they are. But in actual fact, it's turned out to help 44 seriously ill kids. That's reframing the way a meeting occurs. That's what we're trying to do here with our business. And I think we'll get there eventually. There's going to be a point in time, I guarantee it, where every single meeting that happens, we'll be asking the question, who are we supporting? What impact are we making? And that, this is where it all starts. This is how it begins with people like yourself. So we want to thank you for your support on that. Because like Rory says, it is kind of gloriously efficient and unbelievably elegant just to be able to sit down and help somebody and help kids. I think Rory did one of the first. In fact, he did the first one. He had the first call that offset 300 tons of carbon. It actually retired 300 tons of carbon from one video call. So you think about your supply chain and how you can make a social impact there. You can just have a video call and you can remove 100+ tons of carbon from the earth. That is kind of cool.
Very.
So I want to get to the final thing here, because as you know, what we're doing with Meet Magic is we're trying to reframe the way people like yourself connect with the vendors in the market, and we think we've found a way to match people together for great conversations and obviously have an impact. But there are still a lot of salespeople out there that are calling people and doing sort of the old way of doing things and harassing execs. Tell us about your day-to-day and how many emails or texts or cold calls. How do you manage it all? How do you cope with it all? Because we hear most execs get 30 to 40 requests a day for their time. How do you cut through the noise?
I firstly approach it from a empathy perspective. Look, for a bit of my career, I also was on the other side of the table as well. So there is the empathy there for how they feel and what they're going through. They're people with families and with responsibilities and sales targets to meet. So I do have empathy for them. So the answer to your question is that I approach it from an empathetic point of view, that I try to see it from their point of view, and I take the discussions or the calls to have a chat with them. The other part of my answer is also being honest as well. If it's something of that interest, that I tell them so. If it's something like it's not going to happen, like one very good example is just last week we had already signed a deal with another organization. One of their competitors had called us, and I was just honest in saying, look, this isn't going to go anywhere. We've just signed up, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a combination of empathy as well as that honesty. There's 99% of the time the people give you your space, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's the bigger the vendors we find, the bigger the budgets, and the problem with that is that once you actually have a very large budget, you look for very expensive things to spend it on, and that's where I think a lot of the outbound communications are all coming from. There just seems to be a whole lot, and I think automation and AI has actually increased the number of communications that we're all receiving. I get them all day long. You can see them in the trail. You open up one email and it says, "Hey, did you get my last email? Hey, just following up. Hey, been a few days, just checking in." And I've got this trail of emails from one person. It's automation. Well, look, it's been a fascinating chat. I think there's a lot to be thankful for in our roles right now. I'm a bit touched by your empathetic approach to salespeople. I think it's a really nice way to think about things. I think they've all got targets, they've all got their targets to hit, but I think more importantly that pressure seems to come often from the top. It comes from the fact that the company's listed on the NASDAQ and they've got to hit certain numbers each quarter, and if they don't hit those quarterly numbers, obviously the share price or the analysts are not going to do a very good job on the reports, which means your share price is going to get affected. So the pressure to close business is huge, and that just trickles down into all the emails and the cold calls and the messages on LinkedIn that we're all getting, and the desperation to get some time in the diary. So, one of the things that we're very proud of is the fact that we've, with the new platform, allowed salespeople to cut through that noise and directly have a conversation or directly have a connection with people like yourself. And then it's up to you to say yes or no based on whether or not you think it's going to be a good fit for you. So that's really the thing. It's just sort of cutting through all of the noise. And I think when you tend to have meetings where you wouldn't necessarily normally have, this is something that I find fascinating, because this is where serendipity exists. It's where lucky accidents occur. It's like if you have a request in your dashboard in the Meet Magic platform, and it's somebody that has left the field, and you in your brain you would say, well, it's not somebody I'd normally meet with. But in actual fact, that's where opportunity sits, and where lucky accidents occur. Because if you go back to all of your LinkedIn connections that you've got, the ones that you haven't spoken to for a whole year, go and have a conversation with them. because you'll find more news and knowledge out of those conversations than people that you talk to every single day. And so it's sort of becoming this thing now where, we're seeing, for example, a CFO in fact, there's a CFO of one of the very big law firms having a meeting today, but she's meeting with somebody in data analytics. And that is something that she wouldn't necessarily normally meet with, but it's a conversation that could potentially have a lucky accident happen to it. And I think that's a great way to go to work. It
is. I mean, like technologies like that, with these emerging technologies, they're a growing area. More and more people are becoming interested in those areas. And it makes plenty of sense because data is driving everything that we're doing. Even with what we're doing with AI, it's, more specifically about how we mesh or marry AI as well as data analytics, together and what we could get, from that. So it's very exciting. And back to your point, with what you've done with Meet Magic, it's innovation plus. Like I'm speechless with what you've mentioned before, but also the scores or hundreds or thousands of children that have been assisted by the whole range of my peers. So it's humbling, but it's also hats off to yourself around what you've done around putting together such a model. It makes sense. It's effectively a very good way of having people coming together, hence the term Meet Magic. And I think it's that innovative. And you being the head of the organizations, you've embedded your so-called why into the organization, and that's deeply touching.
I've done more than that. I've embedded my whole wallet into it, Chris. I've got nothing left. But you heard the head of the World Health Organization. What did he say? You will own nothing and you will be happy. I kind of understand that because I don't own anything. I've literally got rid of everything, and I just run this business and try and give as much as I can away. I'm 54 this year, and I get the sense that the more you give, the more you are happy. And that's whether it's your time, whether it's your money, whether it's your attention, your love, whatever it is that you're giving, your empathy. I think the more you do that, the more things become better for you. And so with that, did you manage to see the whole of the Rory video that we just posted that was playing before?
I'm afraid not. I've jumped in from another discussion that I was having before, but I do need to do that.
I'm going to play it now as an end game for everybody to watch, for those that have missed it, because I think it's really important that somebody else explains what we do in a much better way than I can. So for those that don't know, Chris, first of all, thank you so much for your support. I'm very, very kind. For those that don't know who Rory Sutherland is, we've managed to convince Rory to become our chief evangelist. He's the current vice chairman of Ogilvy UK and the behavioral scientist practice founder for Ogilvy UK. And he's possibly the #1 advertising man on the planet. And he's done more podcasts than I can think of, and he's on my team now. And I'm so grateful. I'm going to play this video so everyone can have a watch of it, and we'll chat to you again, Chris, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. You're quite kind.
Reasons why we can increase our degree of what you might call random bee activity as businesses made possible by these new technologies. But there is a limit, and this is why I think Meet Magic is absolutely, well, quite literally, magic. And the reason is that by effectively requesting a charitable donation for the meeting, you filter your search to those people who are most likely to be actually relevant and worth meeting, and whose presence is, shall we say, worth exploring, for the simple reason that they've made a costly signal that they believe they can be of value to you. Now, as I said, you could cheekily do that through bribery, but that's generally frowned on. What this is beautiful is that it has the focus, if you like, that the person is making a payment to see you, and therefore you can reasonably expect they have something worthwhile to say, otherwise they'd be giving that money to somebody else. But on the other hand, you don't get all the problems that happen if the money goes to you. What happens is the money which often would have been spent on hosting a trade show stand or taking someone on a golf weekend or doing those other rather kind of extravagant things that businesses do to demonstrate their commitment to each other. Instead, the commitment, rather than going to a golf club or rather than going to a kind of, sports event in the form of hospitality, rather than going to an exhibition hall, it actually goes to a really worthwhile charity. I think this is an interesting idea because I think economists will love it because it uses effectively costly signaling and commitment to filter your attention. If only email cost £10 to send, every email you received will be really, really relevant. So it does that wonderful, wonderful thing. But more important than the fact that economists will find it beautiful, I think both the meeting setters and the meeting takers will, as ordinary human beings, find the whole thing both gloriously efficient and unbelievably elegant. I'm really, really proud to support this business. I think it's magnificent.
How good is that? That just gives me goose pimples. Chris, have a wonderful evening. Thanks so much for spending some time with us. We'll put it up on LinkedIn and we can share it around. And any help you can do to help us drive more executives to the platform, we'll be indebted forever. We're on a mission to put 10,000 execs on by Christmas. That's our goal. And I think if we can do that,
my part, I'll be sharing it across. So no, thank you for your time.
You're a beautiful man. Take care.
Good night.
Bye-bye.